So that lived experience of that history is something that is obvious to me, and I always find it interesting just how hidden it is to other people.
You know, I think that's really hard to say, and what I mean by that is, and what I've reflected on is, I studied Canadian history as a child. I studied Canadian history through high school. I got to study constitutional law in law school. I had such a grounding, and it was so much a part of how I saw my country and my province and my city. It was a part of my basic understanding of the world and where I was in the world. And if I had that back then, I because I have inside of me is an activist inside of me, who's somebody who wants to strive to see people being treated fairly and people being given opportunity. And I think if I had that grounding, I think it would have compelled me to try and make change sooner, be part of the change that I would want to see in my community.
It's funny to think about, just over the past 20 years, how much law has changed, and it's easy to take change for granted. Like 20 years ago, when I was in law school, no one was teaching Haida Nation and the duty of consultation because it didn't exist. It wouldn't happen until 2004. The groundwork for Haida took years. Like it took it having a bit of a seed in 1992 or so with Sparrow, and then lawyers continually bring up cases that takes a consultation concept and creates it as something new, something of its own in 2004. And it's easy to look at that and to say, all right, the law is done, but it's never done. There's always things that continue to move, and what we're seeing now, and we've seen over the last 10 years at academic conferences or Indigenous nations themselves really promoting Indigenous laws coming not from a colonial type of mindset, but coming from self-government frameworks. That type of discussion is happening in the law in a way that didn't happen 20 years ago. And it all builds upon changes. Now, change is something that continually has to be addressed and managed to know where it could unfold, where it will unfold, and where it won't unfold. But without understanding the basic historical steps as to where we got there, it's hard to manage change. It's hard to advise clients about how to deal with it until you actually get your hands and be involved in understanding Indigenous histories and Indigenous contemporary life, Indigenous law and Aboriginal law, to allow lawyers to not stand still. Because if you're standing still, you're already behind. And you can't be behind in this because there's so much that needs to be done.
There would have been, I think in constitutional law in particular, there would have been a few cases that focused on probably the early part of fiduciary duty of the Crown.
And that would have
been the extent of what we touched upon with regard to Indigenous rights. And we would have talked about the division of powers. And so I came out of law school understanding that the federal government was responsible for Indians and lands reserved for Indians. And I would have had some, passing knowledge of the Indian Act. But that was the extent of what we studied.
I hope so. I mean, there needs to be a continued commitment to looking at Indigenous history and Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous reality in a way that's more than just 6 hours once in your lifetime. Like, it is meant to be, I think, a path you continue to walk. And there's sort of an eagerness by some to say, all right, okay, we've done that, mission accomplished, we've solved this problem. And these aren't things that are so finite and so definitive, because there will be new issues as everyone expands and grows, and other problems that may arise or challenges. It's the commitment to be in a relationship that I think really matters, as opposed to seeing where the end of the road goes. You just need to know that you're on the same path together, because if you're not, then things are going to go squirrely. They're going to go totally off the rails. But it takes time and effort in a way that is almost a daily effort, even if it's not a CLE program. It's an effort to actually think about issues in a way that you haven't thought before, which I think is what these cultural competency training programs sort of do, is they have a ripple effect that in 5 years' time, when you're reading a news story or seeing a tweet, you see it with a different perspective that is valuable to you personally and valuable to, I think, the lawyers who give advice to various people, because I think the knowledge base is changing as younger generations are more attuned to history in a way that others weren't. They're going to be seeing those news articles and tweets differently, and you want to be able to see it through their eyes as well, which I think is positive.